The smoke was still rising when General Kine stepped up to the podium, his jaw set like granite beneath the studio lights. Behind him, projected on the massive screen, was a satellite image of the Cordova Basin, a scarred wasteland of ash and twisted metal where 48 hours earlier, Strike Team Vanguard had simply vanished. The room smelled of stale coffee and dread. Reporters leaned forward. Kine cleared his throat and the world went silent. At 0430 hours local time, we lost contact with all 7 aircraft operating in hostile airspace over the Cordova region. Search and rescue operations have yielded no survivors, no wreckage consistent with controlled descent, and no emergency beacons. He paused, and the weight of what came next seemed to age him in real time. It is with profound sorrow that I must declare Strike Team Vanguard as lost in action. We will honor their sacrifice. That is all. The feed cut. Social media erupted. News anchors spoke in hushed tones. Memorial services were planned. But 3,000 miles away in a bunker buried beneath the Targan Mountains, a radio operator named Faris ripped off his headset and sprinted down a corridor lined with humming servers. He burst into the operations center, breathless, wild-eyed. "Sir, someone's transmitting." The colonel didn't look up from his tablet. "Interference. Atmospheric bounce. We've been through this." "No, sir, it's encrypted." "It's ours." That got his attention. The colonel rose slowly, crossed the room, and took the headset. For 10 seconds there was only static, thick, choking static that sounded like the universe groaning. And then, faint but unmistakable, a voice emerged from the noise. "Phantom Actual, this is Revenant 19er, requesting immediate extraction." The voice was hoarse, exhausted, but calm. Too calm for someone who'd been declared dead. The colonel's face went pale. "Confirm call sign," he said into the mic, his voice barely steady. There was a pause. Then the voice came back, stronger now. "Revenant 19er, Captain Alara Voss. I have 4 souls on board and 1 working turbine. We are still flying." The room erupted. Technicians scrambled to triangulate the signal. Maps flickered to life. The colonel barked orders, but Faris just stood there, staring at the waveform on his screen, watching it pulse like a heartbeat that refused to quit, because everyone knew the name Alara Voss, and everyone knew what she'd been through. 2 years ago, she'd been grounded after a congressional hearing tore her record apart over a single judgment call in the Hadrath Valley. They'd called her reckless, a liability. She'd flown cargo runs since then, beneath her skill level, beneath her rank. Most figured she'd quit, but she hadn't. And now, against every odd, against death itself, her voice was crackling through a radio that shouldn't have worked, from a place no one should have survived. Kine's declaration echoed in Faris's mind. Lost in action. But Revenant 19er was airborne, and she was coming home. The signal was intermittent at best, a ghost dancing through layers of jamming and ionospheric distortion. Faris kept his hand on the frequency dial, nursing the connection like a dying flame. On the main display, the triangulated origin point blinked red, deep inside the Cordova Basin, a region now controlled by insurgent forces armed with cutting-edge anti-air systems. No one flew there anymore. Not after what happened to Vanguard. Colonel Wren stood with his arms crossed, eyes locked on the screen. Around him, the operations center buzzed with controlled chaos. Analysts pulled up topographical maps. Logistics officers calculated fuel ranges. Someone was already on the phone with CENTCOM, but Wren wasn't listening to any of it. He was listening to the static, waiting for her voice to come back. "Revenant 19er, say status," he transmitted. Nothing. 30 seconds of hissing void, then hydraulics failing, navigation offline, flying on instinct and fumes. It was Voss. No doubt now. Her tone carried that strange mix of exhaustion and unshakable focus, the voice of someone who'd already made peace with the odds but refused to surrender to them anyway. "How many souls on board?" Wren asked. 4. Crew chief took shrapnel, co-pilot stable. 2 passengers, civilian contractors. They're scared but breathing. Wren glanced at the map. If she was where the signal suggested, she'd been flying for nearly 2 days on a single engine, through weather that had grounded entire squadrons, through a war zone that swallowed helicopters whole. "Voss, you need to set down. We'll come to you." A pause. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, almost amused. Sir, respectfully, if I set down here, we're dead in 10 minutes. I'd rather keep flying. Faris looked up from his console. She's got a point. Hostiles own that terrain. The second she lands, they'll converge. Wren cursed under his breath. He pulled up the weather overlay, storm systems building to the west, visibility near zero. Even if they scrambled a rescue flight now, it'd take hours to reach her, hours she didn't have. Voss, what's your heading? 270, trying to stay low under radar. They've been hunting us since we went dark. They know you're alive. They know someone is. Shot at us twice yesterday, missed by meters. We've been playing dead ever since. Radio silence, low altitude, using the terrain. Wren admired that. It took guts to stay quiet when every instinct screamed for help. It took discipline. How much fuel? Enough to make bad decisions for another hour, maybe 90 minutes if I'm gentle with her. Wren did the math in his head. It wasn't good. We're spinning up extraction now. Can you hold position? Negative. If I stop moving, I'm a target. I'll keep heading west. Meet me halfway. It wasn't a request. Wren smiled despite himself. That was Voss. 2 years of exile, 2 years of hauling supplies and swallowing her pride, and still she flew like she owned the sky. Copy that, Revenant. Stay alive. Wasn't planning on anything else. Briefing room filled fast. Pilots in flight suits, crew chiefs with grease-stained hands, intelligence officers clutching tablets. Everyone wanted in on this. Word had spread like wildfire. Voss was alive, and they were going to bring her home. Wren stood at the front, arms braced on the table, staring at the mission map projected on the wall. Red circles marked known anti-air positions. Dotted lines showed Voss's estimated route. It looked impossible. Listen up, Wren said, and the room went silent. 72 hours ago, Strike Team Vanguard got hit hard. We lost 6 birds. Revenant 19er survived. She's been flying through hell ever since, and now she's limping west on one engine with 4 souls on board and almost no fuel. We're going to get her. Someone in the back muttered, "That's Voss, right? The one from Hadrath?" Wren's eyes snapped to the voice. "Yeah, that's her, and if anyone here has a problem with that, leave now." No one moved. Good. Because she's one of the best damn pilots we've got, and she's proven it by staying alive when she had every reason to quit. Now we do our job. He pointed to the map. Insertion team will consist of 3 Black Hawks and 2 Apache for cover. We'll fly nap of the Earth, use the ridge lines for concealment, and rendezvous at Grid Victor 7. Voss will come to us. We extract and haul ass back before the enemy realizes we're there. Questions? A hand went up. Lieutenant Mara Cross, one of the younger pilots. "Sir, what if she can't make Victor 7? What if she goes down before we reach her?" Wren met her eyes. "Then we go to her, simple as that." Cross nodded. She looked nervous but determined. "Wren, like that. Wheels up in 30. Check your gear, check your cruise, and stay sharp. This is going to be tight." The room emptied in seconds. Wren lingered, staring at the map. Faris approached quietly. "You think she'll make it?" "She's made it this far," Wren said. "That's more than most could say. People still talk about Hadrath, you know. They say she disobeyed orders." "She saved 17 lives that day," Wren said flatly, "and lost her career doing it. So yeah, she disobeyed orders. I'd do the same." Faris nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, sir, I think she's a legend." Wren almost smiled. "Let's make sure she lives long enough to become one." Outside, rotors began to spin. Flight line was a symphony of controlled chaos. Ground crews swarmed the helicopters, checking fuel lines, loading ammunition, shouting over the roar of turbines spooling up. The air smelled of jet fuel and rain. Lieutenant Cross climbed into the cockpit of her Black Hawk, hands moving through the pre-flight checklist with practiced precision. Beside her, her co-pilot, Warrant Officer Danny Ortiz, flipped switches and scanned instruments. "All greens," Ortiz said. "We're good to go." Cross keyed her radio. "Sabre 2-1, ready for taxi." "Copy, Sabre 2-1, hold for flight lead." She glanced out the window, watching the Apache gunships maneuver into position. Their sleek, predatory silhouettes looked almost alive in the fading light. Those were the hunters. The Black Hawks were the rescuers. Different roles, same mission. "You ever meet Voss?" Ortiz asked. Cross shook her head. "Heard the stories, though. Everyone has." "Yeah, well, half of them are probably bullshit." "Maybe. But she's still out there, flying on fumes. That's not bullshit." Ortiz didn't argue. Across the tarmac, Wren climbed into the lead Black Hawk, settling into the left seat. His co-pilot, Chief Warrant Officer Hale, was already running through comms checks. Hale was older, graying at the temples with the kind of calm that only came from 1,000 hours in the air. Think she'll hold together long enough? Hale asked. The bird or Voss? Both. Wren strapped in. She will. She doesn't have a choice. Command's not happy, going into hostile territory for one bird. They're calling it a gamble. Everything we do is a gamble, Wren said. At least this time it's for one of our own. Hale nodded and pulled his helmet on. Over the radio, the tower's voice crackled. All Sabre elements, you are cleared for departure. Winds 290 at 15, gusting to 22. Good luck. Wren keyed the mic. Sabre flight, this is Sabre 1. Let's bring her home. One by one, the helicopters lifted off, their rotors slicing through the damp air. They formed up in a staggered line, noses dipping forward as they accelerated west toward the mountains. Below, the base grew smaller. Ahead, the sky darkened to bruised purple. Somewhere out there, beyond the ridges and the storms and the smoke, Ilara Voss was flying alone. And she wasn't stopping. Not for the weather. Not for the enemy. Not for anyone. Cross tightened her grip on the controls and whispered a prayer she hadn't spoken since flight school. Then she pushed the throttles forward and followed Wren into the gathering dark. Ilara Voss didn't believe in luck anymore. She believed in altitude, airspeed, and angle of attack. Everything else was noise. The Black Hawk shuddered beneath her, its single-functioning turbine howling with the strain of keeping them aloft. The instrument panel was a constellation of red warning lights. Hydraulic pressure dropping, fuel critically low. The bird was dying and she knew it. But she kept her hands steady on the cyclic and collective, coaxing another mile, another minute from a machine that had no right to still be flying. Behind her in the cabin, the crew chief, Sergeant Malik, sat slumped against the bulkhead, his flight suit dark with blood. The bandages they'd wrapped around his side were soaked through. He was conscious, barely, his breathing shallow. The two civilian contractors huddled together near the opposite door, eyes wide, faces pale. They hadn't signed up for this. Voss's co-pilot, Lieutenant J. Renner, sat beside her, his hands hovering over his own controls, ready to take over if she faltered. He hadn't said much in the past hour, just watched her fly. "How you holding up?" Voss asked, not taking her eyes off the horizon. Renner glanced at her. "I should be asking you that." "I'm fine. You've been flying for 2 days straight." "I've flown longer." That was true. Back in her early career, she'd done 72-hour rotations during a relief operation in the Kathari Desert. No sleep, just coffee and adrenaline. She'd been younger then, hungry to prove herself. Now she was just hungry to survive. "Contact 9 o'clock, Renner said suddenly. Voss's eyes snapped left. Through the haze, she spotted movement. A pair of technical vehicles racing along a ridgeline, heavy machine guns mounted on their beds. They hadn't seen the helicopter yet, but they would. "Going lower," Voss said. She pushed the cyclic forward and dropped altitude, skimming the treetops. The helicopter groaned in protest, the rotors biting into thicker air. The technicals disappeared behind a hill for now. "They're everywhere," Renner muttered. "Then we stay invisible." Her voice was calm, clinical. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford, not now, not ever. The radio crackled. "Revenant 19er, Sabre 1, we are inbound to Victor 7, ETA 20 minutes. What's your position?" Voss keyed the mic. 10 clicks southeast of Victor 7, low and slow. We'll be there. Copy, stay low, weather's turning. Already there, she wasn't lying. The clouds had rolled in fast, thick and gray, swallowing the mountains. Rain streaked the windscreen. Visibility was dropping by the minute, perfect cover or a perfect grave. Renner checked the fuel gauge again and said nothing. Voss saw it too. They were running on fumes now. If the engine quit, they'd auto-rotate down and hope for a clearing. But there were no clearings here, just rocks and trees and hostiles. "We're going to make it," Voss said quietly. Renner looked at her. "You sure?" "No, but I'm going to fly like I am." Sabre flight punched through the weather at 200 feet, rotor blades chewing through rain and mist. Visibility was near zero. Wren flew by instruments and instinct, trusting Hale to call out terrain. The Apache gunships flanked them, their pilots silent and focused. This was the kind of flying that separated the good from the great, low, fast, and blind. "Sabre 1, Victor 7 in sight," Hale called. Wren eased back on the cyclic, slowing their approach. Below the designated rendezvous point was a narrow valley carved between two ridges. It offered concealment but little room to maneuver. They'd be sitting ducks if anyone showed up. Saber elements hold position at Victor 7. Revenant say status, static. Then Voss's voice, strained but steady, 5 clicks out, engine temps climbing, we're not going to have much time. Copy, will be ready, Cross's voice cut in. Saber 1, I have movement on thermal, southeast ridge, multiple contacts. Ren's jaw tight, distance. 2 clicks and closing, looks like foot mobiles, maybe a dozen. Damn, they'd been spotted, or Voss had. Either way, the clock just sped up. Saber 3, Saber 4, take high cover. Anything that moves toward us, you light it up. Saber 2, stay with me. Copy, lead. The Apache peeled off, climbing into the murk. Ren scanned the valley, searching for Voss. The rain hammered his windscreen, and then he saw it, a shadow, low and limping, emerging from the clouds like a ghost. The Black Hawk was barely flying. Its nose was high, tail low, the rotor disc tilted at an angle that screamed desperation. Smoke trailed from the engine cowling. There she is, Hale said. Ren keyed the mic. Revenant, Saber 1 has visual, bring it in. Copy, I'm losing power. Her voice cracked just for a second. The first time Ren had heard her sound anything less than unshakable. You're almost here, stay with it. Voss didn't respond. She was too busy flying. The Black Hawk dipped, wobbled, then steadied. It cleared the ridgeline by meters and descended into the valley. Ren could see the damage now, bullet holes stitched across the fuselage, the tail rotor barely spinning, one landing skid bent and dragging. It was a miracle she was airborne at all. Saber 3, contact, hostiles engaging from the ridge. The Apache pilot's voice was sharp. Ren heard the distant thump of cannon fire. Suppress and cover, we're getting her down. Voss brought the Black Hawk in fast, flaring hard at the last second. The skids hit the ground with a jarring crunch and the helicopter sagged forward. The turbine screamed, then died. Silence. Ren was already moving. Go, 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 the crew chiefs leaped out, sprinting toward Voss's bird. Cross brought her Black Hawk in behind them, rotors kicking up mud and rain. Ren jumped down and ran. He reached Voss's cockpit just as she popped the door. She looked at him, face smeared with soot, eyes red-rimmed but sharp. You're late, she said. Ren grinned. You're alive. Transfer happened in seconds. Crew chiefs hauled Malik out on a stretcher, his blood mixing with the rain. The 2 contractors stumbled out, dazed and shaking. Renner followed, moving stiffly. Voss climbed down last, slower than the others, gripping the door frame for support. Ren grabbed her arm. Can you walk? I can run if I have to. Her voice was hoarse, but there was fire in it still. Good, because we're not staying. An explosion ripped through the ridge above them. One of the Apache had fired a hellfire. The blast echoed through the valley, followed by the staccato roar of the chain gun. They're pushing hard, the Apache pilot called. We need to go now. Cross's crew chief waved them over. Load up, move. Voss climbed into Cross's Black Hawk, collapsing into a seat. Renner and the contractors followed. Malik was already strapped in, an IV in his arm, a medic working on him. Ren sprinted back to his own bird, vaulting into the cockpit. Hale already had the engine spooled up. Everyone's aboard. Let's get the hell out of here. The helicopters lifted off in unison, noses pitching forward as they accelerated out of the valley. Behind them, Voss's crippled Black Hawk sat alone in the mud, smoke still rising from its engine. It had carried her as far as it could. Now it was just wreckage, but she wasn't. Saber flight, this is Saber 3, hostiles breaking off. We're clear, Ren exhaled. Copy, form up and head home. The flight fell into formation, carving through the storm. Inside Cross's helicopter, Voss leaned her head back against the bulkhead and closed her eyes. The noise of the rotors was deafening, but it was the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. Cross glanced back at her. You good? Voss opened one eye. Define good, Cross smiled. Fair point. Thanks for coming. Wouldn't leave you out there. Voss nodded. She didn't have the energy to say more, but the gratitude was there, unspoken and heavy. Beside her, Renner caught her eye. You pulled off one hell of a flight, Captain. We all did, Voss said. I just kept us moving. You kept us alive. She didn't argue. Outside, the mountains fell away. The storm began to thin, and somewhere far ahead, beyond the clouds, was home. The base appeared through the clearing weather like a beacon. Lights glowed on the runway, emergency crews staged and waiting. Word had already spread. Radios buzzed with chatter. Ground personnel lined the taxiway, watching the sky. When Saber Flight crossed the perimeter, the tower called it in. "Saber 1, you are cleared direct. Winds calm, welcome home." Wren brought his Black Hawk down first, smooth and controlled. Cross followed. The Apache circled once, then landed in formation. The moment the skids touched the tarmac, the base erupted. Cheers from the ground crews. Medics sprinting toward Cross's bird. Wren shut down the engines and climbed out, his legs stiff, his body humming with adrenaline he hadn't realized was there. Across the flight line, Cross's crew was helping Voss out. She stood on her own, waving off assistance, but Wren could see the exhaustion in her posture. She looked like she'd been through a war. She had. Medics reached Malik first, loading him onto a gurney and rushing him toward the medical tent. The contractors were escorted away, still in shock. Renner limped after them, refusing a stretcher, and then it was just Voss standing alone in the downpour of rotor wash and rain, staring at the ground as if she couldn't quite believe it was solid. Wren approached slowly. "Captain Voss." She looked up. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Voss straightened, pulled herself together, and nodded. "Colonel." That was some damn fine flying. It was survival. Same thing. Voss almost smiled, almost. "Permission to debrief later, sir. I need about 12 hours of sleep first." Wren chuckled. "Granted, get some rest. We'll talk when you're human again." She saluted, crisp, formal, despite everything. Wren returned it. As she walked toward the barracks, the crowd parted. People watched her pass, some whispering, some silent. 2 years ago, they'd written her off, called her reckless, broken. Now they didn't know what to call her. Ferris was waiting by the ops center. He handed Wren a tablet. "CENTCOM wants a full report by morning, and the press is already asking questions." "Let them ask," Wren said. "We got our people back, that's the story." Ferris nodded. "For what it's worth, sir, that was the gutsiest mission I've seen." Wren looked back at the flight line, at the helicopters cooling in the rain, at the empty space where Voss's broken bird should have been. "It wasn't the mission," he said quietly. "It was her." The debriefing happened 3 days later in a windowless room that smelled of stale air and burnt coffee. Voss sat at the center of a long table, flanked by Renner and Malik, who'd insisted on attending despite his injuries. Across from them sat Wren, 2 intelligence officers, and a recording device that blinked red. "For the record," one of the intelligence officers said, "this is the official after-action review for Strike Team Vanguard, Operation Blackthorn. Captain Voss, please walk us through the events from initial contact to extraction." Voss took a breath. "We were inbound to Grid Delta 9 for supply drop when we took fire. Surface-to-air missiles, radar-guided, advanced systems, not the usual insurgent hardware. First hit took out Vanguard 2 immediately. No time to evade. Vanguard 3 and 4 went down in the next 30 seconds. We scattered." She paused. Her voice was steady, but Wren saw the tension in her jaw. "I took evasive action, went low, tried to break contact. Lost tail rotor authority from shrapnel. Hydraulics compromised. Comms jammed. I made the call to go dark and stay mobile." "Why not land and wait for rescue?" the officer asked. Voss looked at him. "Because landing meant dying. The hostiles were organized, well-armed, and hunting us. If we'd stayed still, they'd have found us in minutes, so I kept flying. For 2 days. Yes. On 1 engine. Yes." The officer made a note. Wren leaned forward. Captain Voss made the correct tactical decision under extreme circumstances. She kept her crew alive and made it to extraction. "I'm not sure what else there is to question." The officer nodded slowly. "Understood, Colonel. Captain, can you describe the enemy's capabilities?" Voss detailed everything. The missile systems, the coordination, the way the insurgents moved and communicated. It painted a picture of a force far more sophisticated than intelligence had anticipated. She finished, the room was quiet. "Thank you, Captain," the officer said. "That'll be all for now." Voss stood, saluted, and left. Renner and Malik followed. Outside in the hallway, Renner shook his head. "They're going to turn this into a bureaucratic nightmare, aren't they?" "Probably," Voss said. "But we're alive, that's what matters." Malik grinned despite the pain in his side. "You're a damn legend, Captain." Voss gave him a look. "I'm a pilot, that's all. Keep telling yourself that." She didn't respond. But deep down, something had shifted. For the first time in 2 years, she felt like herself again. The story broke 3 days later. A journalist embedded with the base had pieced together enough to write a headline. Pilot declared dead flies for 2 days to escape enemy fire. By noon, it was trending. By evening, it was international news. Voss avoided it all. She didn't read the articles, didn't check social media. She stayed in the hangar, helping the ground crews, running maintenance checks, doing the work that kept her grounded, literally and figuratively. But the attention found her anyway. Junior officers asked for photos. Crew chiefs wanted her to sign their helmets. Even the base commander stopped by to shake her hand. It was surreal, uncomfortable. She'd never wanted the spotlight. Wren found her one evening in the hangar, sitting on the wing of a Black Hawk, staring at nothing. "They're calling you a hero," he said, climbing up beside her. "They're idiots." "Maybe, but you earned it." Voss shook her head. "I just did my job." "Your job was to quit and go home after Hadrath. Instead, you stayed. You flew cargo runs, swallowed the disrespect, and kept your head down. And when it mattered, you saved 4 lives by flying a dead helicopter through a war zone for 2 days straight. That's not just doing your job, that's who you are." Voss looked at him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the hearing was wrong. The people who grounded you were wrong, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it." She blinked. "You don't have to do that." "I'm not doing it for you," Wren said. "I'm doing it because it's the truth." He hopped down from the wing and walked toward the door. Before he left, he turned back. "You're getting your flight status reinstated, full clearance, active duty, effective immediately." Voss stared at him. "Sir, that's an order, Captain. Welcome back." He left. Voss sat there in the silence, the weight of his words settling over her like the rotor wash she'd learned to love. For the first time in 2 years, she felt the chains fall away. She was free. And the sky was waiting. 6 months later, Voss stood in a briefing room addressing a new class of pilots. She'd been asked to speak, reluctantly at first, but Wren had insisted. The room was packed. Young faces, eager and nervous, all watching her. She cleared her throat. "I'm not going to stand here and tell you flying is easy. It's not. It's demanding, unforgiving, and the stakes are life and death. You'll make mistakes. You'll doubt yourself. And some of you will face moments where everything goes wrong at once." She paused, letting that sink in. 2 years ago, I made a call that ended my career. I disobeyed orders to save lives, and I was grounded for it. They called me reckless, a liability, and maybe they were right. But when Strike Team Vanguard went down, I was there. And when everything fell apart, I had a choice: give up or keep flying. She looked around the room. "I kept flying, not because I'm brave or special, but because that's what we do. We don't quit. We don't leave our people behind. Don't let fear make our decisions." One of the pilots raised a hand. "Captain, what kept you going?" Voss thought about it. "Honestly, stubbornness. And the knowledge that 4 people were depending on me, that's enough." The room was silent. Then someone started clapping. It spread, hesitant at first, then louder. Voss nodded, uncomfortable with the attention but accepting it. After the session, a young lieutenant approached her. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say, you're the reason I applied to flight school." Voss studied her. "What's your name?" "Lieutenant Cara Devlin." "Why'd you apply, Devlin?" "Because I heard what you did, and I figured if you could survive that, maybe I could survive this." Voss smiled. "You will. Just remember, it's not about being fearless, it's about flying anyway." Devlin nodded, saluted, and left. Voss watched her go, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time: pride, not in herself, in what came next. A year after the rescue, Voss was back in the cockpit full-time, leading training operations and flying tactical missions. She didn't talk much about Cordova Basin, but everyone knew. Her call sign, Revenant, had stuck. It fit. She'd come back from the dead after all. One evening, she was walking through the base when she passed the memorial wall. It was a somber place lined with plaques honoring those who hadn't come home. She stopped, scanning the names. Vanguard 2, Vanguard 3, Vanguard 4. Pilots she'd known, friends, their names etched in stone now, silent and still. Voss placed a hand on the wall, her fingers tracing the letters. "I made it," she whispered. "But you didn't. I'm sorry." A voice behind her said, "They'd be proud." She turned. It was Ferris, the radio operator who'd first heard her transmission. "You think so?" Voss asked. "I know so. You brought 4 people home. You didn't give up. That matters." Voss nodded. "It still feels wrong sometimes, that I survived and they didn't." "That's survivor's guilt," Ferris said gently. "But don't let it consume you. Honor them by living well, by flying well." She looked at him. "Is that what you tell yourself?" Ferris smiled sadly. "Every day." They stood there together in the quiet, 2 people carrying weight no one else could see. After a while, Ferris left. Voss stayed a moment longer, then walked away. The sky was clear that night, stars scattered like broken glass. Voss tilted her head back and looked up. Somewhere beyond that darkness, the people she'd lost were still flying, and so was she. 2 years after Cordova Basin, General Kyne requested a meeting with Voss. She arrived at his office uncertain, wary. The last time she'd stood before a general, it had been to receive her reprimand. Kyne gestured to a chair. "Sit, Captain," she sat. Kyne studied her for a moment, then spoke. "I owe you an apology," Voss blinked. "Sir, 2 years ago I declared you and your team lost. I believed the intelligence, I believed the odds, and I was wrong." He leaned forward. "Prove that survival isn't about statistics, it's about will, and you have more of it than anyone I've ever met." Voss didn't know what to say. Kyne continued. "I'm recommending you for promotion, Major, and I'm assigning you to lead a new training program for high-risk operations. We need people who know what it's like to fly through hell and come out the other side." Voss found her voice. "Why me?" "Because you didn't quit, and because the next generation needs to learn from someone who's been there." He slid a folder across the desk. "This is your new assignment. Read it, think it over, but I hope you'll accept." Voss opened the folder. Inside was a detailed proposal, an elite flight program focused on survival, decision-making under pressure, and unconventional tactics. It was everything she'd learned the hard way, distilled into something teachable. "I'll do it," she said. Kyne smiled. "Good. Dismissed, Major." Voss stood, saluted, and left. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson. She walked to the flight line, stood beside a Black Hawk, and ran her hand along its fuselage. This was her world. The rotors, the engines, the infinite sky. And now she'd help shape the people who'd inherit it. She climbed into the cockpit not to fly but to sit, to remember, to breathe. The radio crackled, a distant voice calling coordinates. Voss smiled. She was home. Years passed. Voss's program became legendary. Pilots trained under her went on to fly the most dangerous missions with a reputation for coming home. They called themselves the Revenants, adopting her call sign as a badge of honor. Voss herself flew less as she aged, but when she did, it was always with the same quiet intensity. She never wasted a moment in the air. Every flight was deliberate, purposeful. One autumn afternoon, she took a new pilot, a kid named Carter, barely 23, on a training flight over the mountains. Carter was nervous, overeager, the way she'd been once. "Relax," Voss said over the intercom. "The helicopter knows what it's doing, you just guide it." Carter nodded, adjusting his grip on the controls. They flew in silence for a while, weaving between peaks, the rotors slicing through crisp air. Then Carter asked, "Is it true you flew for 2 days on one engine?" Voss glanced at him. "You heard that, huh? Everyone's heard it." "Yeah, it's true." "How'd you do it?" Voss thought about it. "I didn't think about it, I just flew, 1 mile at a time, 1 minute at a time. You focus on what you can control and forget the rest." Carter absorbed that. "What if I'm not good enough? You wouldn't be here if you weren't." "But what if I freeze? What if I mess up?" Voss looked at him directly. "Then you fix it, you don't quit, you don't panic. You fix it and keep flying." Carter nodded, some of the tension easing from his shoulders. They flew on. The mountains gave way to valleys, the valleys to open sky. Voss felt the familiar pull, the quiet hum of the turbine, the subtle vibration through the airframe, the endless horizon stretching before them. This was why she flew, not for the medals or the recognition, but for this, the purity of motion, the conversation between machine and pilot. The sky, indifferent and infinite, demanding respect and offering freedom in equal measure. "You've got the controls," Voss said. Carter took over, his movements tentative at first, then smoother. Voss leaned back, watching him learn, and she smiled. Voss retired at 53, not because she wanted to, but because her body finally demanded it. Decades of flying had taken their toll. Her knees ached, her back protested, and her hearing was half gone from years of rotor noise. But her mind was sharp, and her love for the sky hadn't dimmed. The ceremony was small, understated. She'd requested no fanfare. But the hangar was packed anyway. Pilots she'd trained, crew chiefs she'd flown with, officers who'd served alongside her. Wren was there, older now, his hair fully gray. He presented her with a shadow box, her wings, her medals, a photo of her standing beside a Black Hawk, eyes fierce and alive. You changed this place, Ren said. You changed us. Voss accepted the shadow box, her throat tight. I just flew. You did a hell of a lot more than that. Applause filled the hangar. Voss stood there holding the box, feeling the weight of it, not the physical weight, but the memories, every flight, every mission, every life touched. After the ceremony, she walked out to the flight line one last time. A Black Hawk sat waiting, rotors still, silent. She climbed into the cockpit, ran her hands over the controls, and closed her eyes. She could still feel it. The pull of the collective, the responsiveness of the cyclic, the vibration through the airframe as the turbine spooled up. It was part of her now, woven into her bones. A voice called from outside. Major Voss, she opened her eyes. It was Carter, now a seasoned pilot himself. Thought you might want a send-off, he said. She climbed out. A dozen helicopters were lined up on the tarmac, crews standing at attention. What's this? Revenant flight, Carter said. One last time. Voss stared. Then she nodded. They lifted off together, a formation of Black Hawks rising into the golden light of late afternoon. Voss watched from the ground, her chest tight with emotion she didn't have words for. The helicopters circled once, low and slow, a final salute. Then they climbed higher, disappearing into the clouds. Voss stood alone on the tarmac, the wind tugging at her jacket. The sky was empty now, but she'd been there. She'd flown, and that was enough. 10 years after her retirement, Voss received a call from the Department of Defense. They were commissioning a documentary about high-risk rescue operations and wanted her input. She declined at first, but they persisted. Eventually, she agreed to one interview. The film crew set up in her living room, lights and cameras crowding the small space. Voss sat stiffly, uncomfortable. The interviewer, a young woman with earnest eyes, asked the expected questions. What was it like? How did you survive? What went through your mind? Voss answered carefully, choosing her words with the same precision she'd once used to fly. But then the interviewer asked something different. Do you have regrets? Voss paused. Everyone has regrets. What's yours? That I didn't save them all. The room went quiet. Voss continued. When Vanguard went down, 6 birds were lost. I was the only one who made it out. I've spent years wondering if I could have done something differently, if I could have helped them. But I couldn't, and I have to live with that. The interviewer nodded. But you saved 4 people. I did, and I'm grateful for that, but it doesn't erase the others. What would you say to them now, the ones who didn't make it? Voss looked directly at the camera. I'd say thank you for flying beside me, for trusting me, and I'd say I'm sorry I couldn't bring you home. Her voice cracked, just barely. The interviewer let the silence sit. When the documentary aired 6 months later, that moment became its heart. Voss watched it alone in her living room, tears streaming down her face. She'd spent years keeping herself together, building walls, staying strong. But here in the quiet of her own space, she let herself feel it. The loss, the grief, the weight of survival. And when it was over, she stood, walked to the window and looked up at the sky. It was still there, infinite and indifferent, and somewhere her friends were still flying. She whispered into the dark, I'll see you up there. Voss died at 71, peacefully in her sleep. The news traveled fast. Within hours, tributes poured in from across the military and beyond. Pilots who'd trained under her, crew chiefs who'd worked with her, civilians she'd rescued, they all had stories. The funeral was held at the base where she'd flown her last mission. Thousands attended. They came from every branch, every generation, every corner of the world she'd touched. The ceremony was somber but proud. They played taps. They folded the flag. They honored her. But the real tribute came after, when a flight of Black Hawks lifted off in formation and performed the missing man maneuver. One helicopter peeled away, climbing into the sky alone, leaving a gap in the formation. That gap spoke louder than any words. It said she was here, she mattered, she flew. Ren attended, ancient now but sharp-eyed. He stood beside Faris, who'd retired years earlier. She changed everything, Faris said. Ren nodded. She did. And she never wanted credit for it. That was her way. They watched the helicopters disappear into the clouds. Around them, people wept and smiled and remembered. That evening, Carter, now a senior officer himself, gave the eulogy. Major Ilara Voss didn't just fly helicopters, he said. She taught us what it means to endure, to push through fear, doubt, and exhaustion, to never quit on your people. She saved 4 lives in Cordova Basin, but she saved hundreds more by showing us how to be better, how to fly better, how to live better. He paused, his voice thick. She once told me that flying is just guiding the machine, but she was wrong. She didn't just guide helicopters, she guided us. The crowd stood in silence. Then one by one they began to clap. It started slow, then built into a roar, not of grief but of gratitude, because Alara Voss had been a pilot, a leader, a legend. And she'd shown them all how to keep flying no matter what. Her legacy wasn't written in medals or headlines. It was written in the sky, in every pilot who took her lessons to heart, in every life saved by someone who'd learned from her example. She'd been declared gone once, but she'd echoed back from the smoke, and that echo would never fade.